While the company side of DC Comics is all well and good to cover, I think most of you have a far greater interest in the actual comics themselves. As the story of the DC Universe began, it didn't start with Superman. It didn't even start with Dr. Occult. Instead, it actually began with a few recurring figures that served as the first pieces in an unimaginably expansive multiverse. If this is your first time with us, I've found that a lot of modern media is pretty impenetrable to newcomers. My goal is to provide a breakdown and guide to the DC Universe in the order of creation so it isn't quite as overwhelming. If you have a favorite character or story and it isn't in this video, it's likely to be found in either a previous one or a video coming later down the line. So, to the newbies, welcome, and to the oldies, welcome back. Let's talk about DC Comics. Barry O'Neill is often attributed as DC's first action hero, and, as would quickly become common practice in the early days of comics, was more so a vehicle to tell these adventure stories than actually being a dynamic piece of the narrative. O'Neill was created by Malcolm Wheeler Nicholson, and was used in a bundle of differing pulps and comics over the years, sometimes as simple literature and sometimes even with other comic publishers. It seems like Malcolm was just never satisfied with how he wrote about Barry O'Neill, and often found himself back at the drawing board, starting over their story from scratch. If you've noticed some of my older videos, you know I can relate. Not much is known about our intrepid adventurer, in all honesty. His family life, background, heck, even his shoe size is left undetermined. But that being said, Barry was still front and center to plenty of Golden Age stories, usually traveling around the world and fighting injustice in plenty of different forms. Spies, competing thieves, foreign invaders, all the classic kinds of enemies you'd expect to find in a comic book from the 1930s. I mean, on the note of Barry's characterization, I think Wheeler Nicholson probably took inspiration from Sherlock Holmes, if I can hypothesize a little here. Barry O'Neill was an intelligent and capable man paired with Inspector Legrand, who was essentially a hybrid of Watson and Inspector Lestrade, and often fought against his mentally equal competitor, an arguable stand-in for Moriarty named Fang Gao, who I will not be sharing pictures of because, well, comic books for a really long time were often less than kind to anyone who wasn't an ultra-white American citizen, Fang Gao included. But in any case, Barry O'Neill set the starting mark for DC characters, and while pretty simply surpassed, definitely deserves some attention as we take our tour through their history. He was one of the first figures of focus, and has been here since the beginning in New Fun number 1. While Inspector Legrand is someone I mentioned briefly while talking about Barry O'Neill, he also played a pretty hefty role in their stories, and I figured should get a little play as well. Barry was a pretty simplistic figure, as I said before, but Legrand was practically a single run-on sentence character description with zero flesh beyond the handful of phrases attributed to him at the initial stages of creation. Inspector Legrand was the assistant to Barry O'Neill. He was a smart man, but benefited regularly from the higher intellect of O'Neill. He was, in spirit, a prototype of the sidekick archetype. He had little agency and was in essence just a walking information hub for whatever nefarious activity needed Barry's attention next. See, Inspector Legrand was a French police officer who was often privy to matters of international concern, and would basically get in touch with O'Neill and point him at whoever the bad guys were that month. I think it's worth mentioning, though not as significantly offensive as Fang Gao, Legrand was also played up as a stereotypical Frenchman, oftentimes speaking with a strong accent written phonetically to emphasize his Frenchness, I guess? Oh boy, these were rough days. Sometimes characters are attached at the hip, just like these two kids, Binks and Bobby. So why not cover them both at once? Again, the very early days of DC Comics didn't have particularly three-dimensional characters, so bear with me while we cover what we can. It's never explained if Binks and Bobby are friends or family. Personally, I think both, but in either case, whether family or not, they spend every moment together, best of friends. During a rainstorm, lost and turned around, the two decide it's become necessary to seek out shelter and wait for the storm to pass. They discover an old building, abandoned, dusty, grimy, and on a table, faintly glowing, is a crystal ball. But this thing isn't just a tool for fortune telling. No, what they've found is the esoteric item known only as the magic crystal of history. In their first encounter with the crystal, Binks and Bobby are drawn to the light emanating from the orb, and are drawn further into it. Literally into it. Within the blink of an eye, they find themselves in ancient Egypt. Now, as a storytelling device, the crystal worked pretty well, and served as a way to share segments of history in a way that I think was pretty clearly meant to be some kind of edutainment. Each time we visited the kids, it was a new adventure with a different historical figure. After the first trip, the crystal only gave Binks and Bobby a view at history, and never brought them to the time period directly like it did the first time. I mean, to be fair, time travel wasn't as frequently explored in stories as it is now, and probably would have distracted from the actual point of the stories if the readers became too focused on the specific mechanics of tampering with major historical events. But in any case, Binks and Bobby got plenty of use out of that magic crystal. Showing up about 50 times, they explored plenty of moments in history, including the stories of Queen Anne, Oliver Cromwell, and eventually calling it quits after peeping on the history of Peter the Great. Okay, so we've got a weird entry for you all. Dinosaurs. One of the things I wanted to draw some focus to was special races that exist in the DC universe, and it just so happens that the first to really crop up are dinosaurs. That being said, I'd also like to note that I am far from any kind of reliable knowledge on real-world dinosaurs. I mean, I talk about comics, like, come on. But still, there's some unique stuff to DC when it comes to the Thunder Lizards that I'd like to touch on. So, spoiler alert, but the dinosaurs get wiped out by a meteor. But in Earth 2, a few manage to hang around. They'd pop in here and there and provide a recognizable but interesting monster, usually as a threat to whoever's the star of that story. Aside from that, there's actually a decent number of the aquatic dinosaurs kicking around in the deeper depths of the ocean, most specifically near the ancient underwater city of Atlantis. This usually holds true for other iterations of the underwater nation as well. In Earth 1, there's a couple other spots to regularly find these elephantastic geckos, though the specifics of how the place functions are super pseudoscientific. They can be found in Scartaris, which is a bubble-shaped ecosystem deep near the core of the Earth. It was initially founded by the Atlanteans, but most of them eventually dipped out after someone mentioned the whole thing about Atlantis sinking. The other big spot is the cleverly named Dinosaur Island. It's figured that it may be connected to Scartaris, so there may actually be some crossover of animal life there, though that's never really been set in stone. Dinosaur Island lies somewhere in the South Pacific, and it's not exactly an ideal vacation venue. Hop into New Earth, and we've got one more focal point for these Triassic terrors, and that's in the plateau of Maple White Land in the country of Ryogwe, one of DC's many fictionalized countries with a name super close to the real one it's mimicking, like Bialya and Karak. This one's a little more interesting, at least, since Maple Whiteland holds extinct species from every era on Earth, meaning you could have some weird habitational combos, like maybe dodos and velociraptors are besties in that place. Who knows? And that's where we'll leave our story for now. If you liked the video, give it a like, and if you liked me, go ahead and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.